a group of friends set out to explore Wildcat Cave, excited for adventure. But what they didn't expect was how quickly things would go wrong. What started as a fun trip soon turned into a terrifying fight for survival. How did it all unravel? Let's dive into the story of the Wildcat Cave Incident. On October 5, 1965, 16 teens and 3 teachers from the Methodist Children's Home in Berea left on a planned trip to Schönbrunn Village in Tuscaro, West County. It was a cool fall morning in a big park, which was a great place for a trip. But a bad flat tire along the way made them have to change their plans. The Hinckley Reservation, which has Wildcat Cave in Whipp's Ledges, was found through quick thought and making do. The group was getting closer to Wildcat Cave, and you could feel the excitement and expectation in the air. Morris was one of them. He and his friends had been to the cave on other field trips. But this time, things were going to go in a different direction. The cave had never been officially mapped or fully explored, so the stories and old records were used to rebuild the passageways inside. The opening to Wildcat Cave, which was cut into a sandstone cliff and measured 15 feet wide and 4 feet high, looked like a dark, jagged mouth. People in the area liked the outside and the area around it, but the inside had an interesting past. Over the years, thieves and runaway slaves had used the cave as a safe place to stay, which led to a story that added to its mysterious and unsettling atmosphere. When you walk into the cave, you'll find the main tunnel, a tight passageway about 80 feet long. At the end, an opening showed a big rock that was leaning over and taking up most of the room. Going straight from here, the tunnel led to a large room that was thought by locals to have been a hiding place for escaped slaves on their way to Canada in the 1800s. It was easy to mix up this path with 2 others around the leaning rock, especially if you hadn't been inside the cave before or had bad lighting. These areas were still uncharted because no one had been through them before. The 3 people in the group chose to go deeper into the cave and check out a well-known room. Morris offered to lead the group because he was proud of how well he knew how to get through the main tunnel. But he quickly lost confidence when he realized that the things that had happened to him before had not properly prepared him for what lay ahead. At first, going through the main tunnel felt safe and comfortable, and there was plenty of room to move around. But after about 60 feet, the cave started to get smaller, making it necessary for explorers to move while squatting. When Morris got to the crossing, he saw a big rock and thought that the path to the big room would go around it. Since no one was questioning his choice to move forward, he did. As Morris moved into the crack, there was less and less place for him to move, so he had to crawl on his stomach. As the cave got darker and darker, he felt trapped, but he was sure that the door to the big room was just a few more feet ahead. He started to feel pressure around his hips and waist inch by inch. In the squeeze tube, Morris didn't notice that he was going down because it was dark. As Morris pushed harder, he found himself in the same position as J.N. Edward Jones. The path going downhill led to a sharp-angled crack. The 5'7" boy who weighed 110 pounds slithered into the wet, slick crack and fell straight into a 9-inch crack, which trapped his hips and body. Morris was eager to leave the orphanage and spend enjoyable time with his friends, but now he had to deal with the results of his decisions. The cave, which used to be said to be a fun place to explore, could now be his grave. Morris got cuts and scratches all over his body as he moved through tight spaces and small passages. Morris knew he was alone in the cave when he reached the most important moment. He couldn't move, so he called for help to his 2 friends. It took them a while to figure out how bad things were and where the frantic screams were coming from. It was scary, so they rushed to get a teacher. The teacher squished into the cave and tried to tie the boy's ankle with his belt. The teacher was afraid of getting stuck if he got too close to Morris. When he got to the safest spot, he put the belt around Morris's feet and began pulling. It looked like they would be successful, but things ended quickly when the belt broke and Morris got stuck deeper in the crack. At this point, Morris started having trouble breathing because his chest was hurting. Morris was pleading for help in the dark and cold, and the teacher could hear fear and panic in his words. The teacher called for professional help right away. Fire Chief Paul Chadura was the first person to arrive and lead a group to Wildcat Cave. Firefighters put in a portable generator to light the cave and gave the boy air through a pipe. They chose to use a pulley system with hooks, but it was very hard to save the people. The cave's layout made it hard to get around, with tight passages and sharp turns that made it hard to see what was ahead. Morris was stuck a long way from the entrance, which made it even harder to get to him. There wasn't much light inside the cave, and it was very dark and crowded, which made the escape even harder. Builders offered to drill through 36 feet of rock, but scientists were afraid that the rock would cave in. The idea of dynamite was also thrown out. The problem went on all night, and both the searchers and the helpless people outside the cave who were watching it all grew more anxious. While it was still in the 30s outside, more than 200 rescue workers, witnesses, family members and reporters gathered at the scene. People all over the country read about the boy who was stuck in a cave and talked about it on national TV shows. Radio broadcasts asked for help from the public, which is what made Evelyn Pinky Pettit, a 5'2", 85-pound nurse from Akron, drive to the cave and squeeze into the tunnel. Even though she could only get 5 feet away, she comforted the boy for almost 3 hours while authorities worked on a new way to get Morris out. Terry Brown, an experienced cave explorer from Akron, offered one way: attaching a metal ring with spikes to the roof of the cave to make a makeshift pulley. Rescuers pulled and tugged, but Morris only moved a few inches before he fell backwards when the rope was taken away. The people who came to help were most worried about Morris's awareness. Nobody could pull the boy out of the water without him having to do it himself if he passed out. This made me think of the terrible event at Nutty Putty Cave, where John Jones passed out during the rescue mission, and the mission was over. In these situations, workers have to push the body out of the crack with their own 2 feet for the last 20% of the work. People who came to help Morris tried to cheer him up all night. They told him they would steak dinner and asked him if he had a lover. Then they made him count to 25 and back again. Dozens of people tried to help, but many couldn't get close enough once they got inside the cave. It had been more than 24 hours, and Morris's replies were getting less clear. Time was running out. A group from the National Speleological Society in Washington, D.C. was flown by the U.S. Air Force in the morning. A machinist named Curtis Peck and his uncle Paul came up with a plan. To carry it out, they sent Michael Reish, an Eagle Scout from North Royalton, who is 15 years old, who crawled into the crack. More than anyone else, he was able to get close to Morris. Morris was able to pull the rope over his arms after Michael threw it to him. After the fact, Michael told reporters that Morris was lying on his right side and could only use one arm. Michael said, "It was pretty tight and scary in there." For Morris's hips to be less slippery, he was told to pour a glycerin solution on them. Then, to make things less rough, he put a thin support board under Morris's legs. Once the pulling began, Morris slipped a few times, but with strong pulls from above, he finally got away. After more than 24 hours of suffering, Morris was finally taken out of the passage and covered in a blanket. There were loud cheers. A lot of people cheered as the boy was put into an ambulance that was waiting. Being in a position of about 60 degrees helped the boy stay living for a very long time. If the crack had been higher, Morris wouldn't have had as long to wait for help to figure out how to get him out. After Morris was freed, the Park Service set off a bomb in the back of Wildcat Cave. In the same way, the opening to Nutty Putty Cave was permanently blocked with concrete. That was 44 years ago, and people learned their lesson. Then it happened again, but this time, the finish was sad.